Alrighty guys, it's Data here tonight, and today we are going to talk about what I think is a super important topic, and basically it's how can we get the most bang for our buck when it comes to GPUs. So what I want to start out with today is I want to go over how to choose a GPU specifically for artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, any of those areas if you're interested in that, and then how to maximize your dollars when it comes to GPU performance, and then so naturally I thought a best way to do that would be to start going over what things I think are important when choosing a GPU for these applications, and then we will look at the best GPUs of 2023 or as of right now in 2023, so almost 2024, and I've compared about, I think it's close to 80 GPUs. So, there's a lot of different comparisons here, and I think hopefully you'll get a lot out of it. I know I did doing the research. So, without further ado, let's hop in. And so, how do we choose a GPU for, AI, ML, DL, whatever your flavor is or your particular specification? You may want different things, but the most important thing, or one of the most important things I think, is the GPU architecture. So this has a significant impact on performance. Typically, the newer architecture, the better. So for example, Ada Lovelace, I believe, is probably the newest or one of the newest. There's Ampere. There is, all these are the data center class GPUs, the Tesla series. So it's important to understand what your architecture is, how it's different than the ones that came before it, and then also probably the most important is your GPU architecture supported? So for example, like I said, Ada Lovelace is probably the most recent, and then Ampere, and then Turing, and Pascal, and all of this stuff. But if you notice, some of them have already been discontinued from production. They still have active support, a lot of them, but then some of them have no active support and just security support. So for example, if you wanted to buy in the Kepler architecture family, well, you still can, and they still, they're still actually, you'll find they're a great value, but sometimes things that are on sale are on sale for a reason, and the reason is because they no longer have active support. So you may run into driver issues in the future. And even the security support ends in about 10 months. So just something to keep in mind when you are buying a GPU, especially since a lot of them are very expensive. You want to buy something that you're going to be able to use for a while. So, this is something that's really important to keep in mind, I think, when asking this question. All right. The next most important thing, I think, is the GPU memory, or VRAM. So, deep learning, machine learning, well, any modeling in this realm can be extremely memory intensive. And if you have a big model, you need to have enough RAM so that you can load it all into memory. And of course, there are ways to get around this, but it's much easier, trust me, if you can fit your entire model into RAM and all of your data in order to run something. If you can't, you have to get creative, and like I said, there are ways, but it just makes things a lot more complicated. So if you can, this is a big thing. And then consider size of your data sets and model parameters. So basically all of this to say, just make sure that you're choosing something that's not only going to work for you now, but it's going to work for you in the future if you scale to larger models. All right, memory bandwidth. This is another I think super important thing. So memory bandwidth allows you to basically transfer, or how fast you can transfer data to and from the GPU. That's super important, because if you have a ton of data and you have a slow bandwidth or small bandwidth, then that's going to be a bottleneck for you going forward. So that's going to be or play into faster memory types like GDDR6X or HBM2. These are some of the newer, I guess you could say, memory types. And this can significantly speed things up. Another thing to keep in mind is NVLink is offered for a significant amount of GPU. So NVLink is actually linking the two GPUs directly together so that they can almost be used as a single GPU and kind of share RAM and transfer directly between them at super high speeds. I think the NVLink 4 is like a couple hundred gigs per second, I think. So, really, really fast, and it makes a huge difference if you're training big models. All right, CUDA cores or equivalent. So this particular video is a little bit biased towards NVIDIA GPUs. If you, and we'll talk about this a little later in the video, but if you go with AMD, or I think there are some others, this may not apply, or that's why it says or equivalent, because it's not going to be CUDA cores, it's probably going to be something else, but the idea here is the same, right? So the number of CUDA cores, or the number of compute units, basically, it directly affects the GPU's ability to, do those parallel matrix computations that give it such an edge, or make it so effective for this type of computing. So you want to keep this in mind, and typically the higher the number of CUDA cores, the better the performance, and so on. It's not always true. It also depends on kind of all these factors together. But as a general rule, more CUDA cores are better. And then there's also this newer idea of tensor cores, which are specifically for deep learning. I think actually Google was the first to experiment with this. But anyway, tensor cores are available in some NVIDIA GPUs. These are typically on some of the newer models. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I want to say it started with the T4, the Tesla T4. But anyway, this basically gives you an edge on mixed precision calculations. So it's able to switch between them pretty quickly. So this is super nice to have, especially if you're working in a mixed precision environment, or you might be swapping between half and single or something like that, different parts of the computation. So another thing to keep in mind here. Clock speed. The higher the clock speed, the faster the GPU can process things. So results in faster training times, faster inference, all this stuff. And there's kind of like some things that we're talking about here that are kind of subcomponents of other things. So for example, clock speed is kind of a factor in calculating gigaflops, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is actually the amount of operations that can be performed at a particular time, or in a particular amount of time, I should say. So some of these are dependent on other things, and that's why it's hard to look at these in a single lens, because a lot of them are all interconnected. Level of precision. So like I was saying earlier, do you need half precision, or floating point 16? Do you need single precision, floating point 32, double precision, floating point 64? So these are all things to keep in mind. What is the level of precision needed for the type of computations that you're actually running? Typically, from my understanding and from my experience, single is going to be what you use most. Single or mixed. Sometimes you can get away with half, but rarely have I seen, at least in my work, that people use double precision. Typically that's for special situations, and like aerospace, or like, I guess you could say, like things that you really need to make sure that you have a high level of precision, because there's some sort of really negative impact if you're a little bit off. So if that is you, then that's something you'll certainly need to take into consideration, because we'll discuss this in more detail when we actually look at the results. Okay, driver support. So, like I was saying earlier, make sure that, or you want to make sure that your GPU is supported by whatever deep learning framework you're going to use, or whatever libraries. So, for example, TensorFlow, PyTorch, all of those things that you're probably going to want to use. You need to make sure that you're going to be able to use your GPU with them. And this is one area where I will say I have never used an AMD GPU or anything but NVIDIA. And I think NVIDIA kind of has this in the bag, because they do have, well, it's still a huge pain sometimes, but relatively speaking, their drivers work. They're kind of plug and play, and they allow you to easily integrate with all these libraries that make things easier and faster to do deep learning and machine learning and such things with these GPUs. So another thing to keep in mind. Although I will say I would like to kind of experiment with AMD at some point if I get a chance. Another thing is thermal design and cooling. So just make sure that whatever application or wherever you're going to put this GPU, you can properly cool it. For a lot of people, this really won't be that big of a consideration, especially if you're going to be putting it in a server like me. Or, but this is a consideration if you're building it yourself. You need to make sure that you have proper airflow, and you've thought about the actual design of your PC or your design of your system such that the GPU will be efficiently cooled, because these things put off a ton of heat, and if you're not careful, then you will burn it up, along with possibly some other components. So again, something to consider here as well. And then finally, this is probably one of the most impactful things for most people, is price and budget. So like I said, we all want the most performance. We would all buy the most expensive GPU if we could, or at least I would. But the reality is you can't, or most of us can't, because the most expensive is, I think, like $40,000 at this point on secondhand. So if you can find it. So most people don't have that kind of money. And typically, if you are doing this as a hobby or, as part of your own personal interest, maybe a couple grand max is what you'd be willing to spend. So anyway, budget is a huge consideration. You can't always get the best because you want it. Sometimes you have to, pick and choose what's important, because that's, what fits in your budget. So, something absolutely to keep at the forefront. And we'll put all this into perspective as we go and look at some hard examples. Community and peer reviews. This is another thing that's super important. So, for example, when you're looking at a GPU or looking at any piece of hardware, look at what the community says around it. Do some research, look on some forums, and see what people have actually used it, what they have to say about it, and what they've used it for, and what it works well for, what doesn't work well for. And then also, another thing to consider is that the more popular piece of equipment or piece of hardware, and the longer it's been used, the more questions will have been solved, the more Stack Overflows you're going to find on it, and the more information and people that can help you with it they're going to be. So, don't be on the bleeding edge, or I wouldn't be on a lot of times. Let all the kinks get worked out, and then let the community be built up before you dive in, to something, which is, again, part of the reason why I've never ventured over to the AMD side, for partly this reason. All right, and then finally, form factor compatibility. Not a whole lot here. Just make sure that whatever you buy is actually going to fit in and work with your system. Like, for example, don't buy a mezzanine card if you're looking for PCIe. Measure their dimensions if you're building your own. Make sure that it's actually going to fit in your case. And then also you understand the power requirements. I've done that before, where I misread or didn't think about the power requirements, and then I had to buy a whole new PSU because I didn't have enough watts to go to power everything. So important to keep all these constraints in mind when you're kind of planning out your system. And then, like I said, long-term viability. So make sure that if you're going to put a lot of money into something, make sure it's going to be give you years of service. So something to think about here. All right, for us though, today we will be looking at gigaflops. We'll be looking at memory capacity, and we'll be looking at memory band. Oh, let's just say bandwidth. My apologies. Anyway, you guys get the idea. So gigaflops, memory capacity, memory bandwidth, and these are in my opinion, probably the three best metrics with which we can use to gauge, how good a GPU is going to work. And I'll show you exactly how we're gonna make a composite score out of these three things, and that's how we're going to gauge the viability of these GPUs. So, And another thing I was talking about earlier, gigaflops is number of cores, clock speed, and operations per cycle. So this one metric gives us, a lot of visibility into several important things that the GPU has to offer. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So that's the end, and let's go ahead and pull up the spreadsheet. Okay, and then we'll start from the beginning. And then I do want to preface this by just letting you guys know how I got this data. So take it for what you will. But Wikipedia was actually a great resource, and I know that it's not always the most trustworthy, but I did spot check a lot of this and check a lot of this manually. So, but this is where full disclosure, this is where I got a lot of the information. So for example, here's the data center GPUs, all this information, Workstation GPUs for the Quadro series, and then I think it's desktop GPUs. Yeah, desktop GPUs. We got I just looked at the 2000, but 2000 series, 3000 series, and then the 4000 series. So that's what I focused on, and I think that's what, for most people, one of these is going to fit the bill. I mean, I don't know that, there's a whole lot of viable options outside of this. I'm sure that there might be, but I thought this was a pretty good, well-rounded view of, what's most important. So, okay, let's look at what I worked with here. So obviously, this is the consumer GPUs. So this would be GeForce, and then I recorded the process. So the manufacturing process, you could say, when it was launched, the number of CUDA cores, and it's actually sorted by increasing a number of CUDA cores, base clock, max boost clock, bus type, bus width, size, clock speed, bandwidth, precision, half precision, single precision, double precision, TDP, so basically how much power does it take at top end, and then price. And the price, I just wanted to speak on that a little bit. So that the price, I kind of not arbitrarily determined it, but basically I went on eBay and I looked at basically the lowest price from a trusted seller. So basically, would I actually buy this, and then what's the lowest price I can find? Because that's what really matters, right? Like what I was trying to do is, get the actual price, the real price now you can actually go out and buy this GPU for, and then record that, not what it was released at, not what it what you could buy it new for, but what you can actually get this for, online. So. And again, if you don't like buying refurbished stuff, then maybe this isn't for you. But for me, I like to get the most I can for the money, and eBay has always been a good place for me to find that kind of thing. Okay. So, and then what I did is I went and I calculated, this is performance over price, price over performance. Yeah, gigaflops per dollar, basically. So I did that for half precision, single precision, and double precision. Okay, and then I scaled it such that this is basically a score. So it's this number divided by the maximum. So you can actually see that here. So in this case, this is this number divided by the max of this entire column. So it's just a way to scale it so that all these fit in a range of 0 to 1 or 0 to 100%. Just makes it plot a little bit better. And then, okay, so VRAM is gigabytes per dollar. And then this is also scaled the same way. And then bandwidth is gigabits per second per dollar. So basically rate per dollar. And this is also scaled the same way. And then the score. So this is again, this is where it becomes kind of arbitrary. I set this up the way that I would want this, but you can adjust this, and I'll post all these resources online, so you can go back and adjust this however you want, and make your own decisions. But for me, I said half, so this score, this scaled single precision score. Oh, I don't want to do that. So scaled single precision score times 0.5. So this is I want this weighted at 50%, and then I want the VRAM per dollar scaled at 25%, or making up 25% of the score, and then I want the scaled bandwidth making up the last 25%. So basically, performance is most important, is half of what I care about. The how much memory it has per dollar is the quarter of what I care about, and then the bandwidth per dollar is the last quarter of what I care about. So I was just trying to make it realistic, because I do care most about performance, and then I probably care equally as much about the amount of memory and then the bandwidth. So anyway, that's how I calculated all of this stuff, and then so I also looked at whether it gotta stop doing that. I also looked at, does it have NVLink support, and that's did that for every single one of these that I could find. Looked at the interface type, so PCIe, and then for the consumer GPUs, the L2 cache. So, if that's important to you, then that information is here as well. Okay, I did the same thing here. Oh, and then sorry, these were the best. So that as far as the consumer GPUs go, all things being equal and only comparing against themselves, so only comparing against the other GeForce GPUs here, these were the top two. So the GeForce RTX 2060 Super and then the GeForce RTX 4060 Ti 8 gigabit, those were the two best bang for your buck, you could say. They had the highest composite score compared to all the others. Surprisingly, the two that had the worst composite score, so basically you pay the most for performance, is the NVIDIA Titan RX and then the GeForce RTX 4080. So that was interesting. I thought it would actually be the 4090, so I did not expect that. Okay. Next, we're moving on to workstation GPUs. So this is the Quadro series, and this is primarily the Ampere and Lovelace architecture. And then again, I'm not going to go through the same thing. It's the same calculations done the same way. I will say though, there's a couple more things here. There's some notes if you care about the graphic capabilities of these GPUs. And then a little bit about the profile and whether it's a single or double slot. So you could check that out if that's important to you. One thing I will say is that these GPUs, these Quadros specifically, they're made for virtualization, and they are not normally cited as wonderful GPUs for machine learning and deep learning. However, what we really care about is, like I said, we care about those three things. So we care about gigaflops, we care about memory, and we care about bandwidth. So if these things can provide or perform well in those three areas, then they should also be considered, which is why I included them in this, I guess you could say, review or which GPUs are most important. So in this category, we had the RTX A2000, 6 gigabyte. That was one of the best bang for the buck. And then the RTX A4500. The worst were the 4500 8th generation and then the 6000 8th generation. So not really too much of a surprise there. But I was actually surprised at this one. I figured it would probably be maybe the 12 would be one of the biggest bangs for the buck there. But finally, moving into the data center GPUs, or the Tesla model GPUs. Again, same thing. With some extra notes here. And in this particular category, the Tesla K20 and the Tesla K10 ended up being the best GPUs for the money, and rightly so, because you literally pay, this one was $18 and this one was $21. So it's pretty hard to beat when you're paying such a cheap price for these GPUs. Now, one thing to note here though, and we're actually going to remove this later on in the calculation because these aren't supported anymore. So I would not buy this architecture. So again, but it is the cheapest if you're willing to deal with the fact that it's not supported. You can get the most performance for the money. And then unsurprisingly, the Tesla A100 and the H100 were both the worst. They were the most expensive for the performance you get, and that shouldn't come as a surprise. Okay, and now if we compare them all, again, this is just a comparison of everything with all of the notes and stuff kind of mashed together, and I took the top 5. So that's the Tesla K20, the K20X, K40, K10, and K80. So basically the entire Kepler series, the entire Kepler architecture, I guess you could say. Best bang for your buck, and then the Tesla M4, weirdly enough, the A30, the A100, both models, and then the H100 were the worst. So again, not super surprising. I don't think on a lot of those. But now let's get out of this spreadsheet and let's actually look at. I made a workbook or a dashboard in PowerBI, and I'll pull that up and share it with you guys here in just a second. All right. So this I made this because I think it's a lot easier to kind of play with this visually and set your own filters about what you want, what you don't want, and you can kind of go from there. So for example, this is one example I made up last night. Let me just clear all this out, and then we'll walk through how I set everything. Okay. So I want everything but the Kepler architecture. For me, I wanted to keep it from, say, 0 to about $500. That's all I'm willing to pay. I don't really care what the PCIe is, honestly. I do care. I only want. I want to buy 2 of these, so I only want stuff over 12. And then I'm going to leave everything. Oh, and then I have a maximum constraint of 300 watts because I'm going to try to put these GPUs in a Dell PowerEdge server, and unfortunately the risers and the 12 volt EPS on both of the risers combined is only it maxes out at 300 watts, so it limits the upper end of what I can put in there. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go look at the performance. So this is a performance comparison of all the things that fit that description. So there is this is sorted based on the performance rating of the single precision. So basically the GeForce RTX 4060 Ti, 16 gigabytes, that just from a raw performance perspective was the best. The P40 was second. The 3060 was third, followed by the P100 12, and the P100 16. These were actually, looks like it was just a little bit better in double precision. Then the M60, the 2060, the M40 24 gigabytes, and the M10. So that's just purely performance. Purely scaled performance, I guess I should say. And then performance per dollar, the M40 was the best by far, and then the M60, and then the M40, and then the P series, and then the Tesla M10, and now you see where it starts to make a difference, right? So this was the first, but now because they're so expensive, these are actually the last three. So when you start looking at relative to the amount of dollars you spend, you start seeing that some of these older GPUs actually still have lots to offer. And then I'll give you my final thoughts here as soon as we finish going through all of this stuff. But so then if you look at VRAM by GPU, so this is just a straight look at how much each has. So this has, I think, 32. This is 24 gigabytes. I think this is 24 gigabytes as well. So this just gives you an idea of how large the GPUs in terms of VRAM. And if we look at it by dollar or scaled by dollar, the M10 is where you get the most memory for your money, and then the M40, and then the M40 24 gigabyte, and then the M60, and then the Tesla P series, and then again last is all of the GeForce consumer GPUs. So, and these are good, these are very good, but with the consumer GPUs, what you'll notice a lot of times is, since you can do other stuff with them, like you can game with them, you can do graphics rendering with these pretty well. They're very sought after because they have a lot of use cases. These are typically always going to be more expensive. So for me, I think the data center GPUs have a lot to offer because they're specifically for deep learning, and especially the older models, like nobody really wants, because you can only do one thing with them unless you're a data scientist or a machine learning enthusiast or whatever. You're not going to really care about the benefits that they kind of provide. Okay, and then bandwidth, gigabits per second by GPU. So again, this is just a flat out comparison. So this is gigabits per second. So the P100 is the fastest, followed by the 12 gigabit, and then the GeForce RTX 3600, and then the P40, and the 26. So you guys kind of get the idea here. And the interesting thing is, as far as bandwidth is concerned, the M40 is the best, and then the P100, they make up the second, then the M60, M40, M10, P40, and then again the consumer GPUs at the bottom. So finally, based on my constraints, which GPU would I pick, right? So this is the composite score. This is everything put together. So what it's telling me is the M series, so M40 and 12 and 24 gigabyte would probably be the best for my use case. And of the two of these, I would probably go with the 24 gigabit because memory is more important to me. I'd rather have more VRAM and be able to shove a larger model in it than have more performance. But that's a personal choice, personal call. And then followed by the M10 and M60, and then you have the P100, and then the P100 12 gigabyte, P40, and these are pretty comparable. And then at last, of course, you have the consumer GPUs. So basically, based on the parameters that I set, these are the GPUs that would be best for me. And of these, I would probably not pick any of these in the M40 or anything in the M series. I think it's Maxwell. Let's see, what are you? You are... Oh, sorry, this one. Maxwell. Yes, Maxwell. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I wouldn't pick anything in Maxwell just because it's a personal choice. For me, I want something that I'll spend a little bit more money on and it will be around and supported longer. Also from a raw perspective, these perform, quite a bit better than not quite a bit, but a good bit better than the M40s. and they're really not that much different. Like if you look at it from a nominal perspective, I think this was like $140, and this was like 50. So it's $100, yeah. But in the grand scheme of things, this is gonna be supported for a lot longer than the M40, and it's newer. I believe NVLink is supported as well. So yeah, let's look at the price here. So the price here is 140. Yeah, for both actually. So you can get 16 gigabytes for 140, and then for the P40, you can get 24 for 175. 24 gigabytes of RAM. So anyway, if you're asking for what my recommendation is, and I guess that was the whole point of this video, is I think the best bang for your buck right now is actually the P100 and the P40. And again, it depends on what your use case is. This is a little bit better for inference. This is probably going to be a little better for training. And this, has a significantly larger VRAM size. I've actually ordered both. So in one of my projects, I have ordered two for one use case, and then I've ordered two in this case for another project. So, I'll actually in further videos, run some tests and do a direct comparison. Which of these is better and for what use cases does it really make sense? And a lot of that will be explained. But I'm gonna put, like I said, I'm putting all of this in the comments, so you should be able to use it. Hopefully it helps you. But if we reset, if we set everything, we take all the constraints away, then you can go through and you can look at everything. You can look at every GPU that I reviewed, and you can directly compare the performance per dollar, VRAM per dollar, all of this stuff, bandwidth per dollar, and then the composite score, and then you can actually see what makes sense for you. And I also added price, so you can actually directly go through and you can compare it with the tooltip and see what these actually cost. So you can kind of see where you're, and of course you can filter what you're willing to spend here as well. Might be easier that way. So anyway, all you need to do, if you're not familiar with PowerBI, is you need to so it's free to download. You can go on Microsoft's website, or you can go through the Microsoft Store and download this, and then you just have to get data, and then you can load in the Excel workbook that's going to be linked in the description, and then you can load it in and then select all of the tabs. So for example, there's 5 tabs here, just import them all, and then this workbook should automatically populate, and you should be able to go and do all the same things that I'm doing right now. So well, all right guys, I think that's about it for this video. Oh, actually, I do want to say one more thing. So full disclosure, I also did read Tim, I think it's Detmer's blog, and he's a really smart guy. He's got a lot of great stuff to say about how to choose a GPU, what's most important, what are tensor cores, and he goes into a lot more detail than I had time for in this video. But he also does a similar comparison, right? So he does the raw performance ranking of these GPUs, or of some GPUs, and then he does a performance per dollar. So you should go give this a read. This is a good resource as well. I just didn't think this was a very complete list, to be honest with you. So I thought this needed, all of the GPUs that we had available. So I just, I took the same idea and I just made it a little bit, made the list a little bit more lengthy, and tried to condense it into a little bit shorter time frame. So I know it's still been a long video, but anyway, guys, hope this was useful to you. In the end, in summary, I think the P100 and the P40 are the best bangs for your buck, and that's what I would recommend. And I actually will be showing you guys how to install those, and then doing some benchmarking in some later videos. So, if you're interested, please stick around for those. But anyway, guys, thanks again, and I will see you in the next one. All right, guys, brief reminder here. If you enjoyed the content, please consider giving me a like and a subscribe so I can continue to grow and produce better and better content for you. If you really enjoyed the content, you might even consider buying me a coffee, and the link for how to do that will be in the video description below. If nothing else, please just give me some feedback in the comments and let me know how I'm doing, if anything's unclear or if there's anything that I can improve on. Thank you again, guys, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.